Hello and welcome back to my How to Start a Megabase series. Today we'll visit Vulcanus and set up our first quality gambler there. It will produce two things at once, legendary foundries and legendary tungsten carbide. But before we get to the build, let me first quickly thank you for the very positive feedback I got from my previous videos and also for the high number of subscribers. It really helps a lot, so keep it coming. For today's build, we will need just 20 legendary quality modules, but the output will be huge. Also, to demonstrate how easy a design like this can be set up, I will show you the build process in one single take without any cuts. Don't worry, it will still take just a few minutes. So let's get going. I start by putting down 4 foundries that will produce the 4 different qualities of foundries, from normal to purple quality. We don't need a foundry for legendary quality here, because even now the output will be way bigger than you might expect. I also leave a gap between some of the foundries, because I want to pipe in the required lubricant there. So I put some pipes in between and connect them to the input pipe, which I already prepared at the top. And before I forget it, I put 4 legendary quality modules into each machine. Now let's add an output inserter. I also add a completely optional combinator as a memory cell to store the numbers of what has been produced. You can leave this combinator away if you are not interested in these numbers. Then I copy this output inserter 3 more times to the other machines. The outputs will land on a belt, so let's place it and bring it down like this. Here I will add the recycler that will scrap all non-legendary foundries. I add an inserter and set its filter condition to only pick up items of purple quality or lower. Also, I add the last 4 legendary quality modules to the recycler. Next, I add a yellow storage chest for the legendary foundries. This will also require an inserter, but this time I set the filter to only pick up legendary items. I also want to continue using non-legendary foundries, so I add a buffer chest here. This will of course also need an inserter. I set its stack size to 1, its filter to normal quality, and connect it to the logistic network. I define the number of non-legendary foundries I want to keep. Let's say 5, because that is also the number of foundries that will fit into a single rocket. I want any excess number of non-legendary foundries to be recycled, so I copy the inserter here and change its logistic condition accordingly. Next, I need to handle the recycler's output. I let the recycler dump directly into a chest, because it will produce quite a large amount of items at once. In fact, it will produce so many items that one stack inserter won't be fast enough to empty the chest onto a belt. Instead, I need 2 stack inserters. In order for the stack inserters to not get stuck, I connect them with wires to the chest and set the mode of operation to set filters. I will explain later how this exactly works. I immediately add a splitter to filter out all legendary items to the right. I use an active provider chest to have my robots sort all the different legendary items, because I might have some general storage location somewhere else on my base. But for this tutorial, let's add some yellow storage chests directly underneath and configure them to store each of the 4 individual items we will get. Let's duplicate the chests one more time to make sure that we have enough storage capacity. Now that we took care of the legendary items, let's hook up the inputs. Due to the high throughput of this first foundry, we need to put a total of 4 buffer chests here, 1 for each ingredient. I also add bulk inserters. To route all recycled items into the correct chest, I need 3 splitters with filter conditions. This bottom splitter will sort steel to the left. This next splitter will sort green circuits to the left. And this last splitter will sort tungsten carbide to the left. The refined concrete will then automatically end up at the very top. Now let's bring the belt with the recycler output up and add another splitter. This will filter all normal quality items to the left, so they can then be sorted by the other splitters. We of course also need to bring in fresh material, which I have prepared already on the right side. So I add an underground belt for the steel and add regular belts for the other 3 ingredients. I only want to buffer a maximum of 200 items in each chest, so I need to make sure to disable the input belt once this threshold is reached. So I add a green wire between this first chest and the last segment of its input lane. I set the belt condition to only be active if there are less than 200 refined concrete in the buffer chest. Let's now add green wires for the other 3 chests as well. This one needs to check for tungsten carbide. This next one needs to check for green circuits. And the final one will check for steel. But before we activate the design, let's continue with the other qualities. First, I add a splitter for all green quality items. Since we have a lot less throughput here, we can save on splitters, chests and inserters and only use one buffer chest. Let's repeat this for the blue quality and add a second splitter and a buffer chest. Which we will immediately copy for the purple machine and also route the belt there. The design is now basically complete, but I will add one more mechanism. Handle the excess legendary foundries so I don't drown in those. For this I add a second recycler here and have it dumped directly into another active provider chest. I configure the inserter to have a stack size of 1 to only put one foundry at once into the recycler. Let's add a decider combinator here and think about the conditions for when we want to recycle our legendary foundries. I only want to recycle legendary foundries if I have more than, let's say, 100 of them in stock. And even then, I only want to recycle them if I have less than, let's say, 2000 legendary tungsten carbide. If both conditions are true, the combinator should output a trash can signal. I then transfer this trash can signal over to the inserter. You can use Q to pick up the signal and hold it with your mouse. I configure the inserter to only be active if it receives this trash can signal. Lastly, I configure a general maximum of foundries I want to stockpile. Let's say 200. And of course I meant legendary foundries, so let's update the condition. Now the design will stop the upcycling process once I have both at least 200 legendary foundries and 2000 legendary tungsten carbide. And that's it, the design is complete. Now let's connect the input belts and see if we made any mistakes or if everything works as intended. This first foundry starts producing immediately, so we might be lucky and have not messed up so far. Of course, this small buffer will grab the first 5 normal quality foundries. Any further foundries will be recycled. You can see the first green quality items being transported to this machine and slowly being picked up by this single inserter. Here's an advanced tip. Sometimes the green quality items come in a bit too fast and start to back up. I can easily solve this with some circuit wizardry. I connect the inserter to the last segment of the belt. Then I configure the belt to read belt contents with the mode set to hold. I then configure the inserter to set filters. This little trick will speed up the pickup process greatly because now the inserter will no longer wait for more items to arrive. It will instead swing immediately and the belt will no longer back up. Now that everything runs smoothly, let's hop into the editor and benchmark the design and find out how many foundries and tungsten carbide it spits out. With the time tool, I will let the game run for 2,160,000 ticks, which is exactly 10 hours. If I also speed up the game by 64x, will this just take approximately 10 real-life minutes. Let's hit run and check back in a few moments. And it's done. The 10 in-game hours have passed. Let's now see how many items we produced. First, we produced a total of 150 legendary foundries, which is 15 per hour, or 1 every 4 minutes. This is more than enough to supply even a decently sized Megabase. And this is also why we didn't need to produce legendary foundries directly. Further, we have produced more than 1 completely filled chest with legendary tungsten carbide, for a total of 2,558. We will, however, need much more of that later for all the legendary items we want to craft. That's why I implemented the second recycler to always have a supply of fresh legendary tungsten carbide, even if we don't need any more foundries. If we were to recycle all legendary foundries we produce, we would get a total of roughly 440 legendary tungsten carbide per hour, and we can always scale this up if needed. And lastly, we have also produced a few legendary byproducts, some 1500 steel, 1500 green circuits, and 1000 refined concrete. But since this took 10 hours, it's little more than just scrap. Let's quickly take a look at the 10-hour production and consumption graphs and filter for normal quality. On the right side we can see how many of the 4 individual items were consumed, for example 960 steel per minute. On the left side we can see how many of those items were returned via recycling. If we subtract these numbers, we get our actual consumption rates per minute. If we divide these numbers by 60, we get our consumption rates per second. Noteworthy is that these numbers are not really that high and can easily be achieved even with a very basic Vulcanus starter base. This also means that this upcycler can and should run at 100% capacity from the very get-go, and that it trivializes both legendary foundries and legendary tungsten carbide. But now I want to test something else that I have read multiple times in the comments. Some viewers suggested to use tier 2 quality modules instead of tier 3 ones. They say that those are a budget alternative to the legendary ones. So I'll put this to a test and remove all tier 3 quality modules and then insert tier 2 ones instead. Again, I fire up the editor and benchmark this for 10 hours straight. Let's see what the differences are. The benchmark is now complete and 10 in-game hours have passed. I collect all the numbers and visualize them. First we need to take a look at the reduction of our quality chance. By replacing 4 tier 3 modules with 4 tier 2 ones, we lower the quality chance from 24.8 to 20% per foundry and per recycler. This is a reduction of 19.4%. But since these probabilities compound exponentially, the reduction in overall production is much greater. We produced 40% less legendary foundries and 33% less tungsten carbide. So yes, you could use tier 2 modules, but you would also miss out on a big chunk of production. And don't forget that you would also need to gamble up the tier 2 modules. They don't come for free. Therefore, I'll personally stick with my proven path towards megabasing and start directly with legendary tier 3 quality modules. Lastly, I want to address another question that I read multiple times in the comments. Why does this stack inserter not get stuck? I'll simplify this problem by isolating it first. Let's put down a chest with some odd number of random items and a belt. If I now add a stack inserter without any circuit conditions, it will of course get stuck. It will pick up some random things and then wait indefinitely, because it wants to complete a full load of 16 items. But now, let's instead configure the inserter with a circuit condition. I connect it to the chest and set its mode of operation to set filters. And since the chest sends its content into this green wire, it will now almost magically work. The inserter will grab some random items and of course will first get stuck internally. But after removing the items from the chest, they are also being removed from the green wire. And the inserter is forced to drop them onto the belt, because it thinks that it holds some forbidden fruit. As we can see, the belt now also contains smaller stacks, for example stacks of 3. This is a very neat trick to utilize stack inserters in scenarios like this, where we handle incomplete multiples of 16. And that's it for today's video. As usual, you can find the blueprint of the design in the video description, though you should really try to build this by yourself, it's a lot of fun. If you like this content, please leave a like and hit subscribe. Thanks and bye.